Federal Labor is no longer committed to holding a vote on whether Australia should become a republic within its first term of government. Key points: Labor is prioritising a referendum to create an Indigenous voice to Parliament. Labor is prioritising a referendum to create an Indigenous voice to Parliament. It would allow First Nations people a say on policies and laws affecting their communities. It would allow First Nations people a say on policies and laws affecting their communities. Last election, Labor set aside $160 million for a plebiscite to determine support for a republic. The party is instead prioritising a referendum to create an Indigenous voice to Parliament, which would allow First Nations people a say on policies and laws affecting their communities. Some Indigenous campaigners and the Australian Monarchist League are concerned that holding two significant votes on constitutional change within a short period could confuse people. At the last election, Federal Labor set aside $160 million for a plebiscite to determine support for a republic before a referendum on what model that should take at a later date. A similar policy was announced before the 2017 election, but a Labor government led by Anthony Albanese will take a different approach. Constitutional recognition and a voice to Parliament for First Nations people remain Labor's constitutional reform priority, and at this stage, this is the only referendum we are committed to in our first term of government, a Labor spokesperson said. Anthony Albanese says, "We need to recognise that our history goes back at least 60,000 years." The head of the Australian Monarchist League said he was concerned by suggestions a vote on the republic and Indigenous recognition could be combined. If a republic is intertwined with the voice, it will make it more difficult for monarchists to get a straight message across on the single issue of head of state, Philip Benwell said. However, it could also have a deleterious impact on the voice if voting for it includes removing the Queen. Mr. Benwell said a significant percentage of his membership supported some form of constitutional recognition of Indigenous people. Women for an Australian Republic's national convener Sarah Brash supported Labor's position and said the referendum to enshrine the voice in the Constitution must come first. "It is necessary for us to be a country reconciled with First Nations before any vote on the Republic, including plebiscites," she said. "Anything less and our Republic will be flawed from the start." A Republic referendum will be a concentrated 3-year exercise in its own right and should have clear air. Albanese says a referendum is one of my priorities. The opposition spokeswoman for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney, has previously said Labor will only call a referendum on a voice to Parliament if it is confident of securing a victory. "We want to maximise the chance of success and do it in a way that has the broad support of the First Nations community," Ms. Burney told the ABC. Senior Labor figures have routinely said that becoming a republic is not a top priority for many Australians, even while announcing the plebiscite commitment. On Australia Day this year, Mr. Albanese described a voice to Parliament as one of his party's top priorities. "We need to recognise that our history goes back at least 60,000 years, which is why one of my priorities will be to recognise First Nations people in Australia's constitution with a constitutionally recognised voice to Parliament," Mr. Albanese said. Earlier this week, Indigenous leaders called on the next federal government to hold a referendum within 2 years. They identified two possible times for the referendum, May 2023 and January 2024. Indigenous legal experts have argued that the Constitution should be changed so a voice to Parliament is a permanent arrangement in Australia. Co-chair of the Uluru Dialogue, Megan Davis, said constitutional change had already received support from unions, businesses, and the broader community. "We're supremely confident that a majority of Australians will vote yes," she told the ABC this week. M to mute, left and right arrows to seek, up and down arrows for volume. Watch 4 minutes 54 seconds 4 minutes, and 54 seconds the key battlegrounds in the 2022 federal election.